All right, let's dive deep into the book of Job. This one's a classic race. One of those big questions that have always kind of haunted humanity. Why do good people suffer?
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure.
And the source material we're looking at today really gets into the nitty-gritty of Job's story, especially those early chapters, like chapters 1 and 2.
Yeah, the setup.
Exactly. We get to see this, well, for lack of a better word, this righteous dude living the good life, but also dealing with some serious anxieties.
Sounds familiar.
Right. It makes you wonder, is this some kind of ancient prosperity gospel thing, or is there something deeper going on here?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
Awesome. So let's get started. What's jumping out at you from the source material? Anything that really grabs your attention right off the bat?
Well, the way they introduce Job is super interesting. You get this detailed picture of a guy living in Uz, which is outside of Israel, right?
Oh, right. Outside the promised land.
Exactly. And he's described as blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil.
So like the ultimate good guy.
Right. But living outside the traditional, religious center. So it immediately makes you think, what does this say about faith? Is it tied to location?
Good point. And what about that whole blameless thing? Does that mean he's claiming to be perfect?
Well, that's where it gets tricky. The source material doesn't necessarily define blameless in a simple way. It could mean absolute perfection, but it could also mean like a legalistic standing before God, or even just a life that's above reproach in the eyes of the community.
Whoa. So lots of different interpretations there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that scholars have been debating for ages, and they probably will for ages to come.
Okay, so we're already dealing with some pretty complex ideas about righteousness and faith, but then the source material hits us with, well, this kind of curveball.
What's that?
It's like, oh, by the way, Job is also ridiculously wealthy. It's almost like, hey, did we mention he has 7,000 sheep? Oh, and 3,000 camels. Don't forget the 500 oxen. And
Right, it goes on and on.
seriously, the guy had a zoo. I mean, you have to understand, back then, livestock wasn't just about having cute farm animals. It meant power, status.
Wealth. Big time.
So Job's not just comfortable, he's like the ultimate influencer of his day.
Totally.
Which makes you wonder, is this setting us up for a prosperity gospel takedown?
Right.
Like, look, this guy is righteous and loaded. God clearly rewards the faithful with material blessings.
It's a good question, and the source material definitely plays with that tension.
Right.
It challenges us to think about what we assume about wealth and God's favor.
For sure. But then there's this other layer, this kind of underlying anxiety that Job seems to have despite all the outward success.
Ah, you're talking about his kids.
Exactly, those birthday parties.
It sounds kind of wild.
Right. But instead of just being a proud papa, Job is super worried about their spiritual well-being.
Yeah, the source material mentions this ritual he does after each party. He offers burnt offerings for each child because he's afraid they might have, and I quote, sinned and cursed God in their hearts.
Wait, sinned and cursed God in their hearts? At a birthday party?
Right.
What kind of teenage angst are we talking about here?
Right. It's a bit intense. And remember, this is Job, Mr. Righteousness, worried about his kids' hidden struggles. It suggests that there's more going on beneath the surface than meets the eye.
Totally. So even in this seemingly perfect life, there's this shadow of doubt, this fear that appearances might be deceiving.
It's like foreshadowing almost for what Job himself will go through later. It's setting us up for a deeper exploration of what true faith really means.
I'm starting to see that. So we've got this righteous guy, blessed beyond measure, yet haunted by this inner anxiety. And if we zoom out a bit, that anxiety connects to this whole cosmic wager between God and Satan, which, to be honest, sounds a little more like a high-stakes poker game than a theological debate.
Right, it's intense. You have Satan basically challenging God,
Yeah.
saying that Job is only righteous because he has it so good.
Yeah, like take away all his stuff and watch him crumble. Pretty cynical view of human nature.
Yeah. It's like Satan saying that our devotion is just a transaction. We're only good as long as we're getting what we want. So the question becomes,
Does God take the bait?
well,
Does God take the bait? I mean, this is a pretty bold challenge from Satan.
it is. And God's response is, well, unexpected. He doesn't immediately defend Job or, strike Satan down with a bolt of lightning.
Okay, so what does he do?
He allows the test to proceed. He gives Satan permission to afflict Job, but with certain limits.
So it's like God saying, all right, Satan, you want to play this game? Let's play. But there are rules.
Yeah, you could put it that way, I guess, but it's definitely more nuanced than that. I mean, it raises all sorts of questions about free will and the nature of evil and God's role in suffering.
Right, right. Heavy stuff.
But yeah, in essence, God is allowing Job's faith to be tested. And not just like a little pop quiz. We're talking about the ultimate trial by fire.
This is where I always get tripped up with the story of Job, you know? If God is all-knowing and all-powerful, why even allow this suffering to happen in the first place?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries, and there's no easy answer. Some people argue that God's allowing this test shows how much he trusts Job's faith. Like he knows Job can handle it.
Okay, I can see that.
Others think it's about revealing a deeper truth, that real faith, genuine faith, can survive anything, any storm.
So it's not about protecting us from the storms, but giving us the strength to weather them.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so let's talk about the storm then. What exactly does Job lose? Because the source material really doesn't hold back, does it?
No, it's pretty brutal. It's like this cascade of calamities, one after another. First, Job loses all his livestock, all those sheep, camels, oxen, everything, gone.
Wow.
Then his servants are killed. And then the most devastating blow.
His children. I know it's coming, but it's still hard to even think about.
10 children.
Yeah.
All gone in an instant.
I mean, how can anyone possibly process that kind of loss?
The source material describes a house collapsing during a storm, with all of Job's kids inside. It's so sudden, so brutal.
Just awful. And it really underscores how random tragedy can be, right? Like there's not always a reason, a clear purpose.
No, sometimes bad things just happen.
It's like having the rug pulled out from under you and then someone decides to kick you while you're down. But as if that wasn't enough, the source material throws in another layer of suffering.
Oh, yeah. Just when you think it can't get any worse, Job gets hit with these painful sores all over his body.
Boils.
Yeah, boils. He's covered in them, suffering physically and emotionally.
It's honestly hard to see this as anything other than divine punishment. I mean, how can you see God's grace in this, his purpose?
Well, that's the question Job wrestles with. And remember, we're only seeing the beginning of his journey here. The real drama unfolds as he starts to process this loss, to question God, to try to understand what it all means.
So it's not just about listing all the terrible things that happened to him, but about exploring his inner world, his response to all this suffering.
Right. We get to see his raw grief, his anger, his confusion. There's that famous line where he says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord."
Powerful stuff. So even in the midst of this unimaginable pain, he still acknowledges God. But he's got to be questioning God too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He doesn't hold back. He rails against the injustice of it all. He questions why he, a righteous man, should have to endure such pain.
And this is where we really start to see the depth of his faith, I think.
I agree. Because it's not about blind acceptance. It's about honestly wrestling with God, searching for meaning in the chaos.
So it's not about pretending everything's okay or giving pat answers, but about confronting those raw emotions, even the anger and the doubt.
Exactly. And it's in that wrestling, in that questioning, that Job's faith is refined. It becomes stronger.
I like that. It's like the source material is challenging us to move beyond these simplistic ideas about faith and suffering.
Yeah, like good versus bad, reward versus punishment. It's inviting us to embrace the mystery, to acknowledge the complexity, and to discover a deeper, more resilient faith that can handle the storms of life.
I think that resonates with a lot of people, you know? We all struggle with that question. If God's in control, how do we make sense of the random, often cruel nature of suffering?
Right. Where is God in all this? And the source material doesn't give us a simple answer. It doesn't pretend to have all the solutions. But it does give us a framework for engaging with these questions.
So it's not about explaining suffering away or ignoring it, but about finding a way to live faithfully, even when things are hard, even when we don't understand.
Exactly. And that meaning might not always be clear. It might not come as a sudden revelation.
But it's there.
It's in the wrestling, in the questioning, in that persistent pursuit of God, even when we don't get it, even when it hurts.
Man, this deep dive has taken us on a journey. We've seen the highs of Job's prosperity, the depths of his despair, and everything in between. We've seen his righteousness, his anxieties, his incredible blessings, and then those devastating losses.
And yet, even in all that, there's this glimmer of hope, of faith that just won't quit.
I think that's what makes Job's story so powerful. It's not a fairy tale, it doesn't sugarcoat things. It's this raw and honest picture of what it means to be human. It acknowledges the pain, the confusion, the doubt, but it also points to something deeper, this truth that even in the midst of suffering, even when we're lost and confused, we can still choose to hope, to believe.
It's about trusting that God is there, even when we can't see him, even when we don't understand.
I'm starting to understand why this story has resonated with people for so long. It doesn't shy away from the tough questions, and it doesn't offer easy answers. It invites us to engage with the mystery, to find our own way through the darkness.
And remember, we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to uncover in Job's journey, so much more to learn.
Which brings us to the next chapter of our deep dive. We've seen Job's world fall apart, his faith pushed to the limit. But what happens next? How does he respond to this cosmic injustice? And what can we learn from his response?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Last time we left Job, well, let's be honest, in a pretty rough spot. I mean, talk about hitting rock bottom. It's hard to even imagine holding on to faith when everything you love, everything you've built is just ripped away.
It's definitely a test of faith, unlike anything most of us will ever experience.
So how does Job respond? Does he just give in to despair, curse God, and give up?
It's not that simple. His response is complex, kind of layered, like the man himself.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
We see raw grief, of course, anger, questioning. He doesn't hold back from expressing his pain to God, you know?
That's good, right? Like, he's allowed to be real with God.
Absolutely. But even in the midst of all that pain, there's this thread of, persistent faith. He refuses to curse God. He clings to this belief that even in the darkness, even when it doesn't make sense, God is still there.
So it's not about pretending everything's okay or having all the answers.
Yeah, not at all.
It's about wrestling with those tough questions, bringing your raw emotions to God, and trusting that even when you're broken, there's still truth to be found.
I think that's a powerful message for all of us.
Totally. So we've got Job in this pit of despair, and then his friends show up. Now, you'd think they'd be there to comfort him, offer support.
Yeah, you'd hope so.
But things take a bit of a turn, don't they?
You could say that. These friends, and I'm using that term loosely here, they come with a very specific worldview. One that sees suffering as a direct result of sin.
Oh, so like Job must have done something wrong to deserve this.
Basically, they come with all these assumptions, basically accusing Job of some hidden wrongdoing to explain his misfortune.
It's like they're saying, come on, Job, fess up. What'd you do to tick God off?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's almost like they're more concerned with justifying their own beliefs than truly understanding Job's pain.
It's like they can't handle the idea that bad things can happen to good people, so they have to find someone to blame.
It's easier to fit things into neat categories, right? But life and faith are rarely that simple.
This part always makes me think about how we approach suffering in our own lives, you know? Do we jump to conclusions, look for someone to blame, or do we sit with the discomfort, admit that we don't have all the answers, and just offer compassion?
It's a good question to ask ourselves, isn't it? I think Job's story reminds us that sometimes the most faithful response is just to be present with someone who's hurting, to listen without judgment, to support them without trying to fix everything.
Yeah, that's so important. And speaking of responses, there's this interesting moment after Job's friends finish their little speeches.
What's that?
Job responds with silence. Profound silence.
It's deafening, isn't it?
Totally. So what do you make of that?
I think that silence speaks volumes. It's a silence born of exhaustion, maybe, but also a refusal to play their game,
Yeah.
to argue about things that are ultimately beyond human understanding.
It's like he's saying, you can't explain this. You can't put God in a box. And I'm not going to waste my energy trying to defend myself against your accusations.
It's a powerful statement for sure.
And it ultimately sets the stage for Job's direct encounter with God.
Which is, well, let's just say it's not what you'd expect.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What happens?
God doesn't apologize.
Yes.
He doesn't offer easy answers or explain why Job had to suffer.
So what does he do?
He reveals the vastness of creation, the complexity of the universe, the sheer scale of things that are beyond our comprehension.
It's like he's saying, look, Job, you're a small part of something much bigger. Your suffering is part of a story that you can't fully grasp.
Right. It's a humbling reminder that we don't have all the answers, that our perspective is limited, and sometimes faith means trusting even when we don't get it.
Wow, so where does that leave Job? Does he get closure? Does his suffering make sense now?
The ending is, well, it's open to interpretation. His health is restored and his prosperity comes back. But the scars of his suffering, those are still there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And while he doesn't get a direct answer to the why question, He does experience this renewed sense of God's presence, God's power.
So it's not a picture-perfect ending, but it feels real.
It does. Life rarely ties things up in a neat little bow. And Job's story is no exception. It's about learning to live faithfully even when life throws you curveballs, to trust God even when your world is falling apart, and to find meaning even in the darkest of times.
We started this deep dive by asking, why do good people suffer? And honestly, we haven't really answered that question. But we have journeyed with Job through his pain, his anger, his doubts, and that incredible, unwavering faith. And I think in doing so, we've learned a lot about what it means to be human, to wrestle with the big questions, and to trust that even when we don't understand, God is still there.
And he's still good.
This has been an amazing journey, and we hope you found it insightful. If outward piety isn't enough, how do we, like Job, cultivate that genuine connection with God, that kind of faith that doesn't crumble when life gets tough? That's something to think about. Keep searching, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
Now that we have unpacked Book of Job a bit, we encourage you to reflect on how these truths can be applied to your life this week. For ongoing encouragement, follow Grace Gospel Church on social media GGEFDE on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and more. Subscribe for more deep dive conversations each week as we explore the messages from Grace Gospel Church. For more resources to grow in faith, visit www.gracegospel.church. We pray for your continued growth in faith.